Hi, good evening to our viewers on DBS Facebook page, and good evening to our listeners on DBS Radio 88.1 FM. And we are here this evening on night 3 of the SSLR project in the Kalinago territory, as we are here to bring you live coverage of the panel discussion as it relates to the strengthening of sustainable livelihoods, resilience in the Kalinago territory. And this evening, night 3, the focus will be on the Kalinago elders. And this evening, for the panelists, will be made up of Patrick Hill, Invine Auguiste, Gerald Langlais, and Garnette Joseph are the elders who will be on the panelists for this evening's discussion. And so far, the discussions started last week, Thursday. On night 1, we spoke about the academics and the heritage of the Kalinago space. On night 2, it was highlighted by the young people in the Kalinago territory. And tonight, we are focusing on the elders. And the entire SSLR discussions will conclude tomorrow evening with a massive session with the women in the Kalinago territory. And of course, the project aim is really focused to create the awareness of the Kalinago heritage, the impact on Dominica and the island's future as the first climate resilient country in the world. And we will take you now to the head table, which is chaired and moderated by His Honorable Cozier Frederick, who is responsible for the Ministry of Environment and Kalinago Upliftment. So without further ado, we will now transition to the main stage as we begin this evening's proceedings with the Honorable Cozier Frederick.
Mabrika. Okay. Mabrika. Good evening to everyone here gathered here at the Barana Ote, the Kalinago Barana Ote, and of course, good evening to those of you viewing this special webinar featuring our Kalinago chiefs and elders. Those of you viewing via Emo News, those of you who are listening actually to the broadcast being carried on DBS Radio, and of course we welcome GIS here with us as well, doing the recording, and will subsequently broadcast the proceedings. Of course, welcome to the panel, and the MP, Cozier Frederick, is going to chair that panel and get the discussion going. My task simply is to, apart from just welcoming everybody, to give you a sense of an overview of the wider project for which the webinar forms a part of. The wider project being undertaken in the Kalinago territory is called Strengthening Sustainable Livelihoods and Resilience in the Kalinago Territory, or SSLR for short. The SSLR project is focused primarily on the Kalinago community, which is home to the largest indigenous grouping in the Eastern Caribbean. The project is funded by the government of India through the India-UN Development Partnership and implemented by the United Nations Development Program in close collaboration with various partners, which include the Kalinago Council, the government of the Commonwealth of Dominica through the Ministry of Environment, Rural Modernization and Kalinago Upliftment, the Ministry of Blue and Green Economy, Agriculture and National Food Security, the Ministry of Tourism, International Transport and Maritime Initiatives. The overall objective of the SSLR the SSLR project is to provide assistance to the Kalinago community to access equitable social protection systems, quality services, and improve sustainable economic opportunities. The success of the project objective is based on 4 key outputs, which include 1. Agriculture, that is to boost agricultural production and sustainable agricultural practices. 2. Forestry, to design and implement community reforestation programs to protect livelihoods and augment critical water catchment areas. 3. Tourism, to develop a comprehensive Kalinago tourism strategy and brand that generates new income opportunities for the territory. And 4. Institutional strengthening, to boost institutional capacities of the Kalinago Council for improved participative and inclusive decision making and planning. There are several activities under each of these outputs. However, in the interest of time, we will focus on one activity which falls under output 4, which I just mentioned, which gathers here today. The SSLR project team, along with the Ministry of Kalinago Upliftment, has noted the importance of creating a wider debate to raise public awareness of the Kalinago heritage and the Kalinago heritage's impact on Dominica and the island's future as the first climate resilient country in the world. So the webinar fits into output 4 as a way of sharing that information, not only with the Kalinago community, but with the wider world and the wider Dominican population. Last week we had 2 webinars, last Thursday and Friday, which featured the academics and historians on Thursday, and on Friday we featured the youth. At these 2 webinars, they were able to do quite a bit of sharing about the Kalinago contributions to Dominica culture and the various takeaways and so on. So tonight, now we will feature our chiefs and elders at this seminar, and tomorrow evening, to wrap it up, the panel will feature Kalinago women. Okay, so we can look forward to that tomorrow evening. So one more thing, the information that we garner from these webinars will assist a number of things. But chiefly, part of the project on Output 4 is the production of 2 Kalinago booklets targeting school children, a coloring book and a comic book. So the information, the ideas that are being shared about Kalinago culture and heritage and how Kalinago culture has impacted on Dominica now, in the past and in the future. This will inform these 2 publications, but also other types of productions, publications, audiovisual, documentaries that we may do in now and the foreseeable future. So there will be a question which speaks to that specific issue of Kalinago representations. So it's a great pleasure to pass the microphone over to the MP for Salibia, Honorable Cozier Frederick, who will then take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Washla, Mabrika, to all our listeners via various media. So really want to say good evening to you tonight, and to say that I'm excited to be here on a wonderful time in Waitikubuli, Dominica country, and as we help to craft the narrative of the importance of indigenous people, the Kalinago people in our wonderful space. Tonight, to start off, I want to thank the Department of Kalinago Affairs, the UNDP and the staff, DBS Radio, Imo News, and tonight we have a sort of special focus with GIS. This evening I was carried to be on focus on government this evening, and GIS is covering this as part of that movement. So really excited about the conversation tonight. And tonight we have a solid team here. We started off this last week with historians and academics. It was a wonderful conversation. It was expanded with the views of the youth. And this evening we'll look at the elders here who will contribute and to add some value to the importance of Kalinago heritage and also the importance of understanding the people who first settled this space. Last year, when I spoke at the budget debates, I spoke about resilience and capacity development in the Kalinago space, and I specifically spoke about the SSLR project, and talking to the fact that we need to boost the agriculture, we need to look at how we reforest our communities, how we deal with the ever rising and competitive tourism product, and also how do we build capacity within our local government system. And so this has come to fruition from the budget debates and a presentation, and I'm so happy tonight we could have the panelists here. Washla, you want to start by introducing this fine gentleman? We do have they have a very long bios. We hope we do justice to it because we have condensed it to something. We hope that it is palatable to the listening public, because these guys have immense knowledge and background. So, Washla, help me out with this here. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Okay, the panelists. Let me just. I wanted to go in the order that they sit. So, starting with the shaman. We have the shaman, Gerald Langlais, who was born and raised in Badaka in the Kalinago territory. He holds the prestigious title of shaman or medicine man of the Kalinago, and is also a traditional drummer, dancer, and performer, a former counselor, certified archery coach. He's a treasure trove of knowledge about the application and use of traditional herbs and nature's innate ability to heal. At a tender age, Mr. Langlais was introduced to the world of sports and culture. It should be 1982, he attained his peak performance as a cricketer in the tournament in St. Vincent, where he scored a century. Upon his return, he joined the Carifuna Cultural Group, where he met his wife, Miranda Langlais. Together, they founded the Carina Cultural Group in 1993 in an attempt to preserve the traditional practices of their people. Mr. Langlais built the Carina Cultural Village, which hosts activities such as Miss Natari and Miss Kalinago pageants. Mr. Langlais has represented the Kalinago people both regionally and internationally, and appeared in documentary films such as No Kitchen Required, Spirits of the Jaguar, and The Lauma Reed, to name a few. He's a powerful advocate for the promotion and preservation of indigenous culture, and was awarded by the National Cultural Council in 2010 for his outstanding contribution to cultural development. He later went on to receive the American Heritage Award in Arima, Trinidad that year, and the Golden Drum Award in 2015. Shaman Gerald Langlais continues to confidently lead the Carina Cultural Group and preserve the Kalinago culture. Okay, next to him, 9, realizing the importance of revitalizing Kalinago culture, he went on to co-found the Carifuna Cultural Group, which exists today as one of the longest-serving Kalinago expression groups based in Dominica, famous for cultural dances, songs, and the drama of the Kalinago people. Mr. Invine Auguiste. Next to him is Mr. Garnette Joseph. Garnette Joseph is the coordinator of the Waitukubuli Carifuna Development Agency, WAICADA. For over 40 years, he worked tirelessly contributing to the development of his community and culture. He was a founding member of the Carifuna Cultural Group and the Carib Liberation Movement, a former Kalinago chief and council member. One of the achievements in his tenure as chief was the weekly celebration that has come to be known as Kalinago Week. Mr. Joseph contributes to work with WAICADA, which supports the repairs and operation of the Salibia Tunubuku Library, with the goal of providing access to information for all the Kalinago youth. Mr. Garnette Joseph. And finally, Mr. Patrick Hill. Louis Patrick Hill aka Nishiabo lives in the hamlet of Salibia, Kalinago territory. Presently, he serves as chairman of the Dominica Water and Sewage Company, DOASCO. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Management Studies from the University of Maryland and a Master of Arts in Public Administration from the University of the Virgin Islands. Mr. Hill is dedicated and hardworking man with much leadership experience under his belt. He has served 5 senatorial terms in the U.S. Virgin Islands and has expertise in government service. His mother tongue is English, but he also speaks fluent French Creole. In 2012, Patrick Hill returned to his birthplace, the Kalinago territory, where he conceptualized and started the development of Iwasi Kalinago Retreat, and also served as a dynamic and well-respected member of the Kalinago Council. Additionally, Hill practices farming and is a community activist for Kalinago rights and upliftment. Mr. Patrick Hill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Washla. And so to the listening public, we do have a well-equipped, if I should say it that way, panel here with us this evening. So a wonderful conversation is expected to ensue from this. We are going to delve into the conversation. The sort of format is very, very simple. We'll allow the presenters to speak to the questions and deliberate over it in the course of 5 minutes. And so we will, and after each of those presentations, I will sort of summarize and allow further conversation to ensue. We also expect questions from the listening public. You could send your messages on the live feed, and also via WhatsApp to us here on the panel. So I want to start off with Gerald Langlais this evening, our shaman, Mabrika. So for this evening, I will stick to Mabrika. I will say Mabrika, shaman Mabrika. And so the first question, we really want to hear from the shaman, how is it, has the Kalinago heritage and traditions helped to shape Waiti Kubuli? And tonight again, we'll take off Dominica and we'll say Waiti Kubuli. And how has it shaped that? And Mabrika, when we're looking at this particular question, what are the most important contributions in your view, and based on your experience as a cultural leader, an advocate, a shaman, what are the most important contributions that the Kalinago people have given to Waiti Kubuli's progress over the years? Mabrika, the floor is yours.
Yes, Mabrika, Nayubuka Bori. Tau Ichiri, Ireme Bone. Tau Ireme Nono, Bebeiti, Tuna Watu. Tau Ichiri. I say thanks to the Great Spirit this evening. Thank you for life, and thank you for the 4 elements, the earth, wind, water, and fire. Mabrika to all. I would just like to acknowledge the Minister, Washla, Gregory Rabes, and the 2 chiefs, and my good friend, Nichi. Our contributions towards the development of Waiti Kubuli. Now, if you take a look back at history and you look at the way that our forefathers defended the country and the Caribbean itself, I mean all the islands, but we're looking at Waiti Kubuli. And Waiti Kubuli itself, Mother Waiti Kubuli, was a fortress to our Kalinago warriors, to our forefathers. Waiti Kubuli provided protection, and in return, our Kalinago braves defended this motherland. For about 150 years, we fought before the others could come to this part of the world. When they brought in the slaves from the west coast of Africa, they were coming to a place where they did not know exactly where they were going. Now, when they arrived on the plantations, you could imagine the white colonial masters would tell them, you either work on the plantation, take your lick, or if you run in the forest, these savages would hold you and eat you. So these people had to stay and take their licks. Now, we as Kalinagos, our forefathers had other ideas. They came down to the sugar plantations and tobacco fields, burned them, attacked them, and set the black man free. Took him into our camps and showed him how to survive in this part of the world. Showed him how to live, showed him how to survive by making cassava, bread, herbal medicines, show him the trails, show him how to use the bow and arrow and all the poisons around them, with them, of course. And in return, not in return then, but our forefathers provided housing for these people. You hear about, governments talking about, it's the first time in the history of Dominica that housing was provided. But we as Kalinagos provided huge houses, huge tabuis for people so that they could hang their hammocks. Many of them, they could house at least 10 families. So we, of course, house a number of people in the time of our ancestors, of our fathers. So we did help in that way. Our herbal medicines, of course, and our traditional way of life, our fishing techniques and so on is used. Then you can understand that moving throughout the forest, we had trails that we could use from east, west, north, south. And the last time I was here, I think somebody spoke about the Chemin-l'Étang. Now, the Chemin-l'Étang, of course, that is where our forefathers used to, traverse the Waitukubuli, going from one point to the next. But there is also, of course, a story to Chemin-l'Étang about the child of Karuhu, where the Ajabless, make a child with somebody that, the Gawi. So, that was all part of our tradition, of course. When it comes to the stories and the myths and the legends, we had all that too. We help, of course. And also, up to today, we have different things that, like places like village names and so on, all the different communities on island, we contributed to that. If you're living in Kalibishi, if you're living in Kolihu, if you're living in Kulibishri, of course you're living in a Kalinago village. So all that is part of our contribution, of course. Waitukubuli is still Kalinago. And once you're living on Waitukubuli, I believe that you're Kalinago, of course. Because you could be, there are people who have black, they are black, some people are Kuli, some people are, but they have Kalinago blood, of course. So if you live in those communities, then you should know that you have Kalinago heritage. So with that, I would just say thank you very much. Ahura.
Thank you very much, Maviga, for this in-depth and all rather brief. We tied on with time. But three important points stood out. The defense of the country is key. And he spoke to the 150 years, and we have argued in the academic circles, maybe talking about even 200 years of that. And what was happening also in that space was that we kept the Windward Islands basically in a marginal relation to the slavery in North America. So while slavery was still in North America, we were able to resist that in the islands. So, and the natural fortress itself was a good point. It created that space where we could defend. As you're aware now, even in the Kalinago territory, it's also a natural fortress. He spoke about the housing, which is important. He used a word here, the tabui. which is the sort of big house, the Kabe. It's used interchangeably. The Kabe, Tabui are very big dwelling houses. So when you hear the word Tabui, it is actually a big space like a Kabe, and the housing of people as they escape the plantations. And important aspects that remained also the herbal medicines, the fishing and techniques and so on, the trails that were used during the resistant efforts. And also lastly here, he mentioned all of those village names across the country, which we normally ascribe to being Creole, but they actually really strong, very, very strong Kalinago names. So Mabrika, I want to thank you for this bit here, as we carry on the conversation. Chief, I just want to remind you of the question. Chief, I call him Chief Irvins, Nanichi. How has the Kalinago heritage and traditions helped to shape Dominica? And more importantly, what are some of the most important contributions that the Kalinago have made to Waiti Kubuli? And Chief, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mabrika, and to Greg's and to our minister. Just want to recognize you and my other panelists here. Our contribution well, the question actually says, what's our contribution to Dominica? But permit me to extend it a bit to say the Caribbean, because the Kalinago people were found in many places in the Caribbean, many islands in the Caribbean, and the issue of were we there or was it a myth? That is a question that is going to be out of the question, since a situation that is different, in the sense that recently we've been seeing a lot of research being done through archaeologists, and there's proof that the Kalinago people did occupy way down from Venezuela all the way up to Hispaniola in Cuba. So we were there, and our contributions then could be looked at as the way that we fish, again, the way that we communicated, having our dugout canoes and moving across the oceans from island to island. In those days, there were no boundaries between the Dutch and the French and the English. It was just the Kalinago enjoying the space of the Caribbean. And the administration, the governance too, of Kalinago people back was something that I think the Caribbean have been trying to do for the longest while. And I said that to say that we had an organization back in those days where the cacique would have been based in Cuba as the head of all the regions, and the Ubutus would have been in different islands in the Caribbean. So we know later on, as time evolved and colonists came in and left, that there have been movements for the single market and economy, the CARICOM, and all these organizations have tried to be formed. And so it's not new to us in the sense that we already were so organized. So that is something that we already had in terms of governance and administration in the Caribbean long before the people who came afterwards, our friends, our neighbors. We look at things like our bow and arrows. You know, we had our bow and arrows which we use for hunting, and it probably would have been seen as primitive and backward by many people days afterwards. But then we look at an arrow, a bow and arrow going out to hunt, and we would hunt and shoot. Our ancestors would shoot what they wanted, completely different from a gun. You take a gun, you go out to hunt, you shoot, you frighten all the other birds in the area. You disturb the whole ecology at this time. Good. But then our ancestors would go out there with their bow and arrows, which probably look primitive, as I said, but they shoot just what they wanted. And every other bird is quiet, all other man you could check in their scene, you take your food, go home, feed. But what has happened to bow and arrow? Whilst it may have been seen primitive by some people, later it was developed, and then the archery game came about. It was they just developed our bow and arrow and made it into archery, you know. The herbal medicines. What persons probably would have seen as primitive, and because, you know, all the Kalinago people or the Carib people, whichever term they would have used then, were just using bush. They're not going to the doctor. Bush medicine. Today, from what we had then as herbal medicines and still have, today is a big industry. So many persons are into herbal medicines. You hear talk about sustainability. We hear permaculture. We always did permaculture. In our agricultural development, we always planted cane, potato, a little hot pepper or something all over the place. That was how we did our agriculture. And one of the things that I just want to point out again, there is another big industry today, and maybe humorous to you, but I'm serious about it. And that is, persons would, and I've seen it happen many times. Persons would look at the 17th, 18th century drawing of Kalinago people, and they look at it and they see these little grass skirts or these little grass things on them with the little strings going from. Look at how the people on them used to dress. Today, lingerie and G-strings is a big thing in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief, for this year. As a very quick recap, I think the conversation, it's a very important point here, Chief, that you that you made to highlight that the Carlinago heritage and that story moves beyond the borders of Waitikubuli. And so evidence would have shown us that our people have traveled as far enough as the Bahamas, even to Florida, and so would have cemented our heritage right across the chain of countries. And archaeology, like you rightly say, is now unearthing that, for sure. And so the fishing, how we communicate, and the free movement, a very key point. And so the present notion of the free movement of people is nothing new. It was what was practiced by our Kalinago people. And so we contributed that to this entire movement. The bows and arrow, the Kevlar, and I don't know if a bow and arrow can penetrate a Kevlar. I know bullet can stop. Kevlar can stop a bullet, but maybe not a bow and arrow. So an arrow. So it's important here. And the point about the sustainable farming and farming practices, not overutilizing our natural resources, was also a key thing that Chief Wivins here spoke about, and also the fact of the mixed farming practices, and also something that leads to fashion and being able to survive in a tropical place with something that is appropriate, and I think it adds some value to the conversation. So thank you for that, Chief. And so I just want to get another Chief ready for the question. Just to warm me up, Chief. What have we? So I see I got Kalinago. It's not we, because I'm part of it. How have we helped shape Dominica? And what are the most important contributions that we have made to Waitikubuli? Chief Joe, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Honorable Frederick. Pleasant good evening to Washla, Serabes, and fellow panelists, the audience, and the listening public. As far as Dominican history is concerned, it talks about the time when the Kalinago lived in this country. But we know West Indian history, and we know that early o'clock, the Thomas Warner, in his search for El Dorado, established the first colony in the Eastern Caribbean. But from there, colonization spread to Antigua, Montserrat, and the other islands in the Leeward Islands. Now, very interesting in that history was a figure from Dominica in Thomas Warner. And the history of Thomas Warner would tell us that, being the son of an English colonist, he knew the ways of the colonists, but also he was a Kalinago. And his history would tell us that in order to protect the freedom of the Kalinago people, he raided every emerging settlement that was established in the Leeward Islands, because he could see something that would have had serious implications for his people in Dominica and the rest of the region. And that was to avoid the islands being colonized. And we know that part of the history where in that effort he was able to keep Dominica from colonization for over 200 years. So what does that mean for Dominica? So it's out of that we could see, we could call Dominica the nature island of the Caribbean. Because had it not been so, it would have been different in this country. Also, we could safely say that Dominica had the shortest period of slavery in the entire region. So, in 1978, Dominica became independent. Why? They wanted to be able to make decisions of their own and take charge of our own destiny. That is what Thomas Warner fought for, and the rest of the leaders who followed after him. Is that freedom to keep Dominica safe, but same thing as Dominicans we wanted in 1978. So the whole thing of this is something that people across the world want as well. Freedom. This is a universal thing that everybody wants. But we were able to demonstrate our freedom quite clearly in this region, and Dominica has benefited from the fierce Kalinago spirit, the freedom they wanted to just live a life. And the historians documented that type of freedom, because there's nothing that they could get the Kalinago to do. If you like going and fish today, you go fish. If you like sleeping today, you stay and sleep. Because we just had that level of freedom to do whatever we wanted, and under nobody's domination. So we have been able to demonstrate that to Dominicans, but also is the survival skills. It is interesting to note that the persons who came from Africa, they came from a different land, different environment. And hence, the survival skills, what was required to survive in our environment was totally different than what they would have left behind in mainland Africa. So my fellow moderator spoke about the runaway slaves being taught to survive. And it's interesting to note that, the level of our survival skills, because I myself, in growing up, I saw that being demonstrated. But also, what important contributions? Well, the language, name places. Sometimes we think that some African names some words are African origin, but it's Kalinago. The free movement of people across the region, free trade, and regional integration is one of the things that is spoken about now, but it's something that the Kalinago people left behind. And communal living. It's one of the things that we left in small communities across the country, and they're able to share everything. So when we spoke about Kudme and everything else, something as a tradition that is quickly eroding, but this is something that the Kalinago has left behind and has contributed significantly for the development and progress of this country.
Thank you very much, Chief Joe. Recapping brief, he spoke about Thomas Warner, which is a very important point. I think it's a narrative that has to be spoken about more in context of Dominica. And as a matter of fact, the Thomas Warner, which he spoke about, was actually the first governor of the First Nation, because he was named so or referred to by both the English and the French. So they recognize him as the governor of the island, or the First Nation. And his brother had the massacre, what we know as massacre in Kinfield, and the language and place names and the language, and of course, before the term Creole, what we know as the Creole in the most recent narrative, there was a mixture of Kalinago, Taino, what they call Arawak, mixed with Kalinago, which was spoken. This language was spoken way before what we know as that Creole we talk about now. And so people were able to communicate with each other across borders. So, Chief, thank you for that. And the communal living is important. Even today, we have vast areas of family lands across the country, and that is a tradition out of the Kalinago heritage, where we live together in community with each other. Nichi Abu, do I highlight the question, or are you ready to rule? Nichi Abu is ready to rule. My friend, you have the floor.
May the ancestors be pleased with my thoughts and my expressions this evening. Mabrika, I am joyful to be sitting here with my brothers and to be honored and recognized and asked to participate by my brother Shubutu. So thank you. Ihora. I will not repeat what has been so eloquently stated by my brothers who have spoken before me. They have given you a lot of history and a lot of information about how the Kalinago people have contributed to the development, the growth, and the current position of our country. So let me just mention a couple things that are more recent, since they have done a really good job on the past. So one of the things that I just want to highlight is the location of villages. Dominica, unlike many of the other Caribbean islands, is an island that has a population that is dispersed all over the island, on several little bays and in some mountainous, sometimes inaccessible places. We must ask ourselves, but why were those villages, why were they established? Why are they where they are? Why is Mont Prosper where it is? Why is Loda where it is? And clearly, it has a lot to do with how the Kalinago people themselves had their villages established around the island, which sort of laid the foundation for the future development and establishment of villages during the colonial era with the slaves who were in Dominica. All of the villages, Aitasi, Font Saint-Jean, Maho, all of these coastal villages were at one point in time occupied by Kalinago people. The fact that we are predominantly established on this side of the island today is not a reflection of where we have been and how we have lived. So the villages in Waitukubuli is definitely a reflection of what our civilization was prior to the colonial times. In more recent times, I think our contribution to the development of Waitukubuli are, I think, in two primary areas. In the areas of tourism and in the areas of fishing. So we all know that whenever Dominica is marketed, that the face of tourism is the Kalinago face. There's an iconic picture of a young Kalinago woman with some really just a beautiful expression that has captivated the entire world of tourism. And it has driven, I believe, significant business to Dominica, to Waitukubuli, because of the presence of indigenous people on this island, because of the way that the government has marketed the country using the indigenous people to do that. Additionally, and one of my brothers mentioned it, the island is marketed also as the nature island of the Caribbean. Well, it is no accident that we are the nature island of the Caribbean. It is a direct result of the fact that our ancestors fought and resisted colonization with every ounce of their strength and courage and blood. And so today we have a country that was not turned into a whole cultivation of sugarcane and tobacco and all kinds of stuff. We have an island that has been preserved because of the Kalinago people who occupied it and who protected it from colonialism. So I think those are just the points that I would like to add to everything that has already been stated.
Thank
Ahura.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nichebu, and very, very important connection to the future and to the present. The location of villages and the establishment of the settlements are key and definitely contributed by the Kalinago to Dominica. And what's interesting is that we do have a number of village names across the country. So we could differentiate them by them being either English names, French names, or Kalinago names. What we realized with the English names we have, because we had a longer experience of English settlements here on the island, they are all copied after names in England. And so when you hear names like Trafalgar, it's an English name, but the Kalinago name and Creole name is Kaiche. And so when we juxtapose that, the Kalinago and the French names, we realize that the Kalinago and French names are very similar because what they normally do, they describe the natural features, like Grand Bay, Guambe, Berikwa, natural features, and also it talks about the geography and the geology. That's important. That's what we have added to the conversation. Nichebu spoke about tourism and the face of tourism in Kalinago, rightly so, and also the importance of us being an ecotourism site that leans heavily on the protection of our ancestors to the forest and the natural reserves we have. Also fishing, he mentioned fishing, and even as late as the 1940s, we had canoes all across the island, in Mahu, in Newton. The Kalinago fishing vessel was what we used to pull out the sprats and the bala and all those stuff here, in Layu, etc. So we have made some serious strides in providing that sort of significant development to our white Cuban society. Very good first warm-up knock. We are going to go very briefly and quickly into the second question. And to give the panelists a heads up, we're going to look at the impact of all of that on the future of Dominica. So we're going to see how are these things going to impact the future of our white Kubuli. And we want to speak about that contribution within the context of climate resilience and climate change. So if we can do it that way, I think we could add some value to the idea or the notion of building the first climate resilient country. Shaman Mabrika, how do we look to the future with all that we know to be really very strong Kalinago heritage?
Well, yes, Mabrika again. I mean, if we can combine, some of the past and what we have in the present, then I believe we can, move, into the future and being very, very, very resilient. Already, we as Kalinagos, when you talk about resilience, you're talking about Kalinago. But if we add our architecture, our designs, the way we build, we can, look at us building a huge tambui like that. It haven't got to be, in straw, because when you talk about a tambui, people believe, well, you're just building a kaipai. But you could design it in a way, and you could house, 2-3 families in that. That is all part of our architecture. Being resilient doesn't mean that you have to, build a whole set of concrete boxes. But if you look at our architecture, then we can work on that. We can work on designs, and that can help us further our cultural practices and also being resilient. And also, when it comes to polluting, flinging, voltiging rubbish everywhere, I believe that, we are people have to start looking at Waitukubuli as a nature island and look at us as, we as Kalinago people, we never was accustomed of flinging, things everywhere and polluting, our rivers and dirtying places and so on. We had our own ways of doing things. We would peel our food and use it for fertilizer in our gardens. So instead of us using so much pesticide and weedicide that we're using today in our agriculture, I believe that we sort of polluting our environment and also we sort of losing some of our fish life and some of the things that we used to depend on in the past and we should be depending on as we move on into the future. And our herbal medicines also. I believe that we could use our herbal medicines when it comes to maybe storms or natural disasters. When you cannot find a doctor, you haven't got, you can't go to Roseau, everywhere destroyed. I think that we should put into practice, us as Kalinagos, using our traditional medicine. Because I remember a couple of years ago, we had a lot of sansi, leeches and so on. And that is a master doctor. If you get a blow now from, a branch, something knock you, you fall down, you knock your foot and so on. The leech was something that they would put on where you get the knock, and it would suck out the old blood, and then put it back into a jar, and you're good to go. You can hardly see that anymore. We should also practice some of our. I sure that a lot of us doesn't even know how to pose a cuckoo. Because, people, a cuckoo is something, a wrong bori, that you would, put a little rum in it and let it, catch it fire and rest it on the place where you get the knock with 2 little slices. And right away, you get a break. So that is so. Our traditional medicines and our way of doing things is something that we should look at, in that aspect. And I believe that also, as Kalinagos, we should also look at the way we do things. When it comes to our fashion, maybe the ladies will talk about that tomorrow. When it comes to traditional wear, the way we dress, the way we look, all that can make us stand out as Kalinago people and make the rest of the world, look at us as unique. Somebody just spoke about tourism, and that is something that we have to look at. Because our fashion can bring us, millions of dollars. So we also have to look at that. So with that, I will conclude. Ayahura.
Thank you, Ayahura. Thank you so much, Mabrika. Important points here. And I back this 100%. It's something who's going to be a caption for me in the coming weeks. Kalinago is resilience. That's key. By the very nature that we survive years of genocide and exploitation, etc., we are able to survive in these times, resilience. And Mabrika spoke about the architectural designs and how do you juxtapose this against using so-called modern materials. I think this is key to the future of the island, how we treat with the designs and architecture that I think will add some value to our country is important. And waste disposal is key here. I think it's important. Like Marika said, we recycle, we compost, and we have a tradition of not polluting. And just by building our homes, and she spoke about it earlier on about the settlements, we never even built close to rivers, so we had no chance to pollute the river, etc. It's important here. And he spoke about the medicines, and this is key. This is also very, very important. It is spoken about in the circles now as alternative medicines. No one gives it the true value or the true name and call it indigenous medicine. They say alternative medicine, but it adds value for the future. And how do we create more resilience with our local herbs and traditional ways of dealing with medical conditions. And the fashion, I think is something that we want to challenge designers and young people tonight to inculcate aspects of our ancient wear and into present fashion. Chief Nanichi, I want you to carry on from here to build on that conversation. So you have the floor. We're looking at the future.
Thank you very much again. I pretty much will follow from what our chairman have said. To say that the architecture of our buildings would have stood out to the point that even when the recent Hurricane Maria passed, a number of persons who looked at the housing stock and the housing that stood up around were pretty much that from the Kalinago style or design. And I'm talking about, and you people will know too, I'm talking about the new houses that were built, and not necessarily those that government sponsored, just persons even privately who had new houses constructed. They went down, a lot of them got damaged. And we'll look at some of the old buildings between Atkinson and the Kalinago territory. Some of them having wooden pegs that stood up to the Category 5 hurricane. We'll look at much even closer to us, the old council, what can be referred to as the old council building, at the top and in the mouth of the wind, despite the fact that some persons may think that it is not solid. That stood up to the Category 5 compared again to other houses that were constructed recently. So housing is one of the key things there. And herbal medicines is something that we need to continue to practice. But we need ourselves to not only practice this, but to see how we can make it marketable ourselves. Because a lot of the indigenous, a lot of what is ours is being taken by other persons and made marketable, whereas we remain the people even not having copyrights over our own products. So this is something I think that is very key for us to look in the way going forward to, that we look at intellectual property rights and copywriting and that kind of thing of Kalinago heritage. And our foods, I believe we need to start looking more and practicing the foods. We're eating a little bit too much rice, and we are forgetting food like the bread nut. We are cutting down bread nut trees, and we are planting chin and bananas and other things that was later brought in. We need to do more potatoes. We need to plant more topi tambu. We need to grow more boitin so that the children can enjoy and appreciate boitin when they go to school at break time, instead of they eating cheese ball and whatever big food and small food, that they can appreciate more of the grapes, the sea grapes. They can begin to appreciate more of the zikak. Those things that our people ate, we ourselves, some of us ate. And we are here and hearing young people telling us, but this fellow is not aging at all. So this is the good vibes, this is the good food that we need to go back and grow and practice agriculture with the moon. People would plant according to the moon. Today with all the research on science, I remember I studied agriculture, of course, and then like the moon wasn't even taken into consideration. It was a whole different scientific approach to the agriculture. And so we need to look back at those things because they have helped the resilience process. The garbage, as my brother rightly said here, we would take the food peeling, and I mean, I'm looking at this thing very seriously again. That if the rubbish truck don't pass, the dogs are having a feast and the kind of nastiness that is on our streets. We've been there before and we never used to see those things. And why we were not seeing those things? Because our forefathers, when I grew up, we were growing and eating a nice mess of cocoa and some roast pig with meat in the morning for breakfast. But today, if we do not have bread with plastics to throw around the place, we don't think we have breakfast. So those are the kind of things that have been resilient to us. And we did not have plastics, we did not have corned beef tins to throw around, and sardine tins and all those things that we must be, bagging and carrying and put on the side of the road. And the truck doesn't pass, then the dogs pass and make the place look so untidy. So I think all those things we just need to take into consideration as we move forward, because we have been so self-sufficient and we need to continue to be self-sufficient as far as food is concerned.
Yes, thank you very much, Chief. Briefly, housing and architecture, it's important, the medicine and the rebranding and the patenting, Chief. That's important you mentioned here. The traditional food, the traditional yams. I know one of my fast foods when I was growing up was just passing around pick a guava, some sea grapes, some kakane. And so that was my fast food. Now the fast food is in a bag. So I agree with you on that. And the bui and all that kind of stuff. The lunar calendar and agriculture, we have to make that link because we know that the lunar calendar sort of controls the tides and water movement. So it's important we can bring that back into the conversation. And also, importantly, garbage and disposal. And as a matter of fact, listen, public, we do have a project with the Solid Waste Management Corporation, which I'm happy to be the leader here as the minister, called the Kalinago Zero Waste Project, which will bring in the traditions of the Kalinago people in separating garbage and using it in the traditional ways that we did before. So it's a very, very good point here. Chief Joe, let's roll.
Yes. In regards to Dominica becoming the first climate resilient country in the world, that cannot be done without taking into consideration its food security. And in doing so, we don't have to look back on what Kalinago people did for their own survival. Because we seem to think that after any major disaster, that some foreign country must come to our assistance and provide food for us. However, this is something that we should take into consideration in times of good times and bad times. It doesn't necessarily require disaster for us to focus on our own food security. This should be part of the way we do business, and that should be first and foremost. Particularly now that the present situation in Europe now highlights the need to take that into consideration. So, how do we do that? So sometimes we have some of the foods that we used before we have completely forgotten about the ado and the wawa and that type of food. Also, we have to look at the cassava and give greater importance to cassava, because while cassava in the country and in our region has taken a backstand, I mean, is on the back burner now, we have to see how much the world is making use of cassava in Africa, India, and some of the other countries. So we only have to just take a look at some of the things that not only Dominica, but what the region and what the Americas has offered the world in regards to food, and see how much of that we can reclaim and use to ensure that at any given time there's sufficient food in the country. But it means also is how we deal with the land and how we take care of it. Because we seem to think that after us, there won't be another generation. We seem to think that we last inhabitants of the country. So we do things without giving thought to the future. And so this is why the government had to ensure that laws are enacted to protect the wildlife, because once the agouti can be found, you eat as many agouti as possible. As if there's no end to the number of agouti that is in the wild. So had it not been the decision to protect our wildlife, it would all be gone. I mean, in this area now where we are now was being overrun by iguana, and if you see one now, well, it's quite amazing because they completely gone. So we have to learn to be able to take only as much as we need for our own survival, but also see in ways that we can ensure that some of the things that are important are maintained. That's important. And the Kaliningo survival skills I mentioned before is important because while it relates to food, it relates to just the way we do business, the way we ensure that we survive and ensure continuity to our survival. And that means our connection to nature. Some people would maybe find it impossible to walk around barefooted, but this is one of the things that I think everybody should do at some point in time. Just step out, leave their shoe aside, and just step out and let their foot get dirty in the soil, because that connection to nature is not always there, and it's one of the things that I can assure us here and the listening audience that we need to do, and look at the natural life differently and see ourselves as part of it. That it is not something that's separate from us, and we part of the whole ecosystem, part of what is there in this world. But most importantly, I want to stress again is taking into consideration the food security of the country as part of its effort to be the world's first climate-resistant country.
Gracias. Thank you so much, Chief. Food security is key here. I know, and even when we hear the normal narrative on the Kalinago people, on the Kalinago, we would hear they are small farmers and artisans as if it was something bad. So sometimes the very practice and the very way in which the narrative is written, and so when you hear the economic development of the Kalinago space and what do they do for survival, they say, oh, the Kalinago people are just small farmers and artisans, as if it is something terrible. But it's not. It's something we can add value, because food security have never been a problem for our people across the millennia. Never been a problem. We're able to grow our own food, our own crops, and also grow our own local animals and domesticate our animals to ensure that we had food security. So that's key moving forward. And the extent of that need, as Chief rightly said, was seen in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, when we had a lot of imported food coming in. And like I said last week, the Kalinago people would have cultivated most of the crops that grow underground, what we call the ground provisions, and these normally survive massive hurricanes and disasters. And the survival skills it is key, I think, and importance to connect to nature. We see a resurgence in the world where everyone is trying to get out of their air-conditioned boxes and to enjoy nature. And if we do that along the lines of the Kalinago model, we will have a thriving tourism industry and also a sort of safe haven, a new frontier for the ever wild and crazy developing world. So thank you so much for that, Chief. Nichebu, we want to do this, and after Nichebu is through, we'll take a few questions. I have a few questions from the feed, and I'll ask those questions to the panel, however. Yes. Nichi.
Aurora. So I think to answer this question, I want to suggest that we must go back to a different time, to a time before the colonial experience, before neo-colonialism, a time that my brother Shibutu likes to refer to as the time of abundance. And that was the lifestyle and the time that I think we should examine to determine how we move into the future. We should not base our vision of the future on our recent memory, because our recent memory is a memory of colonialism and exploitation and slavery and genocide. But there was a time before that, and I think it is the time that my brothers have spoken about. But if we examine our lives today, and that includes the Kalinago people in this community, in this space, we will recognize that we have inherited and we have copied and we have sort of incorporated into our lives practices and values that are not in tune with nature, that do not support resilience. Resilience, sometimes I think when I hear the word, and it is being bandied about a lot these days, that people think maybe resilience is building a big concrete box that you can crawl into when a hurricane comes and you'll be okay. But that has very little to do with resilience. Resilience begins with the human being, with the human spirit. We, as people, must be resilient. And for us to be resilient like our ancestors were, and to deal with all of the challenges that will come, we must go back to that time and figure out what the value system was. And my brothers have mentioned this connection to nature. The fact that our ancestors, before they cut a tree, would speak to it and ask its permission, and to say that they were doing it only because they had to and there was a need. That before they killed an animal, they did the same thing. And when they toiled the soil, it was looked at as Mother Earth, as their mother. Today, what are we doing? We have chainsaws in the forest just murdering the trees. We have people who are gumming these trees, and you walk into the forest and all of the gummier trees look like they have cancer. We have people who are practicing agriculture with Gramaxone and top and this and every pesticide in the world. We are killing the soil. We are poisoning our rivers. We are killing the life in the sea. These are practices that came out of our recent memory. These are colonial practices. These are things that were imposed upon us. And now we practice it as though it is our own and it is our way of life, and it is not. So for us to be an example of what Dominica should be as it seeks to be the first resilient country in the world, we must look to a different time, a different memory, a time of abundance, a time when the soil was rich, when the rivers were teeming with fish, when the Kalinago would just pull out in a dugout canoe right there on the coast and catch as much as they needed to eat. So that I would suggest. But we do still have some practices that are good. To some extent, we still live in our gardens, even if we are using Gramaxone and poisoning the soil. But we still sort of live in our gardens. We still grow our dashin and our cucumbers and our fig. We can still walk out in the yard and pick something and have something to eat. But we can do better. This idea of food security and food sovereignty is such an important issue for this country. And I think what is happening in the rest of the world is a great example and reason why, as Dominicans, we must begin to really figure out how we can be self-sufficient when it comes to food. This idea that when you want lunch, you go to Kentucky. Kentucky Fried Chicken is the worst thing in the world to eat. It's a bunch of poison. Poison in your system. And it's the most popular thing in this country. We have to move away from that. We have to find the things that are healthy for us, so we don't create all of these diseases that put pressures on our healthcare system that we cannot afford, that causes all the cancers and hypertension and diabetes and all of these things. We need to go back to a different time and think of a different value system that encourages us to be in touch with what is around us, with our environment, and to live sustainably off of the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Nietzsche, for that very passionate link to the time of abundance. I think it's important. It's a time that I really want us to review and understand in its entirety, and to speak about the human spirit and connection to nature and resilience. I think is key. It's a very key point here. And you spoke, Nietzsche, about the agricultural practices and the sort of scientific agriculture that we do. We think we try to do a scientific method with agriculture, with pesticides and weedicides, etc., which is of course polluting nature. And so going back into the time of abundance would illustrate to us that we did not use any of those things, and that's why we do have nature intact today. You spoke about living in the gardens. I think the food security issue is very relevant in looking at resilient Dominica. And also, how do we link that food security with the health of the nation? So that this is a very, very key points here. So at this point, the listening public and panelists, I want you to address a few questions from the listening audience. The first question, the essence of the question is, we spoke a lot about ethnicity, we spoke a lot about culture, we spoke a lot about communal land. And someone is asking, apart from those things that we can extract as being Kalinago or highlight as Kalinago, what other things set us apart from the other Dominicans or other Caribbean citizens, apart from the communal ownership of land and the sort of ethnicity, the color of our skin and our bloodline, etc.? What other things that set us apart from other white Cubulians and other Caribbean citizens? Anyone of you want to tackle this?
My response to this question would be not to focus on what sets us apart, because it is a way to divide us. We should focus on what do we have in common? What are the commonalities? What makes us one people, one nation, with different beings of different heritage? We are indigenous to this part of the world. Other Dominicans who have come from different places may be indigenous to the places that their ancestors came from, Africans, British, whoever. The fact is, we have a common humanity. And we should celebrate our common humanity while at the same time respecting the individuality of people and the need for all of us to survive on this island. It is a small island, a small space. The Kalinago people have been put on a very small portion of this country, forced into living on 3,700 acres of land, 2% of Dominica. So there are a lot of things that we could talk about that makes us different and puts us in a different category. One of the things is, for instance, it was just sort of, it is getting ready to be fixed, is this idea that Kalinago people have never been able to go to the bank and get credit. That sets us aside. Every civil servant in this country for the last, since independence, has been able to go to the bank, buy a home, buy a vehicle, start a business, except for the Kalinago person who is a civil servant. Why? So there are many things that could set us aside. But I think as we look to the future, we should focus more on what makes us one people, our common humanity.
Thank you, Nichi, for that. I think very passionate and very in-depth response. I don't know if any one of you want to add some value to that and lead on that part of the conversation.
Well,
Chief Joe, yes?
I'd agree with my fellow panelists here, because I think somebody be looking for an answer that suits their own particular interest. But I think that as Kalinago people, be part of the wider Dominican society and part of the region as well. So we would, while there are concerns there are things that concerns us in particular as residents of the Kalinago territory, we have to look at how do we keep on contributing to the development of this country. Hence, drawing lines and setting up barriers would not be in the best interest of neither parties. So I think that we have to look towards what we can do and the commonalities between us, and ensure that we harness all our resources as a potential as Kalinago people and non-Kalinago people for the development of this country. Because it was which president who said that? I think it was Kennedy who said, let us see what we can do. Ask what you can do for a country and not what the country can do for you. And I think it's important that we ask the same question to what can we do for a country, whether it be Afro-Dominican or Kalinago. So hence, our effort should be on developing the territory as our own space, but also how do we contribute to the development of the country as Dominicans.
Thank you so much. You want to add some value, Chief, to this?
I don't know whether the question was intended to be one way or the other, but my contribution to it would be what sets us apart should not be looked at negatively, but in a positive sense, and that is to say that the Kalinago should not be seen as just Kalinago, but we need to see ourselves as part of an indigenous world movement, and so that sets us apart already, because we here are Kalinagos, they're the Mitmacs, the Pegos Nation, there's a lot of other nations, the Pequots, there are a lot of other nations like us around the world. We have the Aborigines in Australia, we have the indigenous peoples in New Zealand. So on an international level, we don't set ourselves apart. We are just part of a larger movement, a larger family, and there are things that have made it good for us because of that family. And that is because, and I can point to things like the United Nations then, addressing world issues, would be addressing indigenous peoples as a special group of people, like how you look at the disabled persons or the physically challenged people, or youths, and that kind of thing. The OAS has a desk for indigenous peoples. The International Indigenous Peoples Movement, the World Council on Indigenous Peoples, the IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, has a desk specifically for indigenous peoples. So if we look at it in that positive sense, there have been, that would probably put us apart in the positive sense.
Thank you, Chief Anichi. Yes, so we're good on this here. I want to go delve into the other question. What I want you to also think is another question from the audience, which we'll bring in after the third question here. Someone asks, is there any evidence to suggest or to highlight the use of cannabis as herbal medicine by the Kalinago people? So I want you to think about it, if there's any data that we have or information about that particular thing. And also another question to consider. Is it too late to have a name change from Dominica to Whitey Kubuli? So definitely we will look at those questions if time permits us during the conversation. Gentlemen, we're doing fine. We're doing very well here. Question number 3. Let's get ready for this. We want to leave with the listening public a few takeaway points, a few things that we really want them to pen down in the diaries after tonight's conversation. And so what are some of the things you would like to leave with the listening audience regarding the importance of Kalinago heritage? That should really be cemented, maybe etched on a wall in their home, or on a pillar of the house, or a screensaver on their computers. At least four of those that every Dominican should be aware of regarding the importance of, and here's how we say it, their Kalinago heritage. So it is apparent to us that throughout the conversation that the heritage that exists within the country is not only endemic to the people of the Kalinago space, but also it has spread its wings across the entire landscape. Mabrika, Shaman?
Yes. I would just like to tell the rest of the Dominican people to just take a good look in the mirror. Take a deep breath, meditate hard, go deep within yourself, and ask the question. Because Kalinagos doesn't only live here in the Kalinago territory. Because there are Kalinagos in Petit-Soufrière, we have in Bacatel, we have in Petit-Savan, we have in Capuchin, we have in Buetica, we have just all over the country. I remember a couple years ago, that was in 2006, we embarked on a program that we should visit all these communities and reconnect. And I believe we should do that again. Because Waitukubuli is Kalinago. So during that movement, Kalinago we settled all over the place. So we have families in Petit-Savan. We have families in Petit-Soufrière. So it would be good to reconnect. And I would like us as Kalinagos and those out there listening that we should try and reconnect again as Kalinago people. There we build strength. Because I have spoken to Kalinagos in Petit-Savan and Petit-Soufrière, and what they are saying is that we have forgotten them. We doesn't regard them. So I believe that we, here in the Kalinago space, we should try and reconnect with our families and our blood brothers in the different communities. Now, I would also like to tell the people of Waitukubuli that when you look around you, you see a lot of green mountains and beautiful spaces. There are places on Waitukubuli that is very sacred to us as Kalinago people. We have burial grounds all over the place, all over the island, secret spots, and they are being used as rubbish dumps. I believe that the people should really take a good look and think deep that where you're throwing your garbage and your rubbish or whatever you're throwing could be a secret and a very special place that our forefathers used. So that is maybe two. The people of Waitukubuli, once again, when you take a good look at yourselves, I mean, you cannot say that you haven't got Kalinago blood. One way or the other, you have Kalinago blood somewhere. If you look at the different faces that you can see around. So, the people of Waitukubuli, I would just like you to respect us as First Peoples, as Kalinagos, because I remember back in the 60s and 70s, we have gone through a lot of discrimination. People have disrespected us. Mal kwaib sauvage, yo ha ito avay. Kwaib this, kwaib si, kwaib sa. So I would like people to respect us as First Peoples, as Kalinagos, because we have contributed a lot to this country. And we are still contributing. So we need the respect. And I will even go as far as saying that there should be laws to protect the Kalinago race, the Kalinago people. Because we have laws protecting Agouti and Manikou and all sorts of stuff. But we are losing our people. We are losing our tribe, our race. There should be a special law protecting us as First Peoples. Because I remember when we were in the council, some guy was trying, to set traps for people in the community. And in order for us to get that man out, we had to write a letter to the Minister of Community Development to get him out. I mean, what is it that the minister know about the territory? So, I mean, there should be a way that the chief and the council, or whatever it should be able to deal with that. So what I'm saying is we need a special law to protect us as indigenous peoples, First Peoples on this Waitukubuli. Ayahura.
Thank you very much, Shaman. Very briefly, takeaway points that Kalinago did live all across the country. It's a fact. And we need to reconnect, and that's important. We do have sacred spaces all around the country, and that's important. And as a matter of fact, when you look at the islets out on the East Coast, wherever there's an islet in the sea, on the ground is a Kalinago settlement. It's a fact. And this is a sacred ground. So Cabana in Londonderry, on the ground is a sacred space. Out in Salibia, out in North End in Marigot area, out in Castle Bruce, all of these are sacred places. And so he's right, we have to protect those sacred spaces because they are burial grounds, there have been settlements there. And of course, another important point, the takeaway, facial features can sell you out. It's important that we do have that in that space. And so sometimes when we discriminate, you may well be discriminating against your own self because you are of Kalinago heritage. And the respect for indigenous First Peoples is important, very, very important. And so how do we protect? Food for thought. How do we continue to protect the sort of tribe that has been very, very powerful in preserving what we now know as Waitukubuli? Chief Anichi, let's roll.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks again. I'll begin by saying that from the 80s to now, I have found a greater consciousness among our Dominican persons. Back in the 80s, they were really looking at us still as primitive or backward or second-class citizens. But today, I don't know if it's a change from Carib to Kalinago, or if it is because we have had so many other persons from Dominica studying abroad, going to universities and studying other indigenous peoples, that they have begun to appreciate the indigenous peoples of Dominica. But I want to say tonight that I have observed there's a bigger consciousness, there is a better communication and more respect given to Kalinago people, and I appreciate that. Um, I want to run into the 4 points I've just jotted down, and that is the Kalinago people have always been self-sufficient. We've always been self-sufficient in many ways, and despite what other persons may want to think, Kalinago people are proud. We are proud to be Kalinagos. Our houses may be small, unpainted, sort of maybe on the side, but we don't pay rent. We don't pay no rent at all. And Kalinago people never try to live above their means. Okay, so that's a level of independency there. Now we've seen changes, and we appreciate it. We see new houses coming in, and we are very grateful, Mr. Minister, to you and your government for those kind of changes. Unfortunately, Maria gave us a nice blow, and personally, I'd have liked to see more traditional style houses being built now. But probably that is something we will consider for the future. The Kalinago people have never been poor. And persons would have referred Kalinago people poor. But Kalinago people can't be poor when they can feed themselves all the time. They don't go to anybody else asking for food. You know? So our problem have been that we have been disadvantaged in probably building better houses to make people feel, well, yeah, you know, we're cool. But this is maybe something of the past, now that this government and our minister here have worked to see that we now have a facility in the aid bank. And that's something we've been looking forward and asking for a long, long time. So we hope that would be able to change us. But remember, we've never been poor. We may have just been disadvantaged. And the third thing is that some persons try to make us believe that our communal land is what was holding us back, holding back our development. But absolutely not. What was holding our development back is what our minister and this present government have, finally get us to organize by putting a financial facility in place. You will see the changes. You definitely will see changes there. Because Kalinago people are not only resilient in the different things we do, but we think. We do a lot. We have a lot of academics now that's serving the country, and that's another area again that we have been able to contribute. We have surgeons and we have doctors, lawyers and pilots. So we're smart. We were just not given the equal advantage at the time, but we've been able to come forward and prove that we are smart people and we can do it too. And the fourth thing I'd want to say is that the Kalinago people have been the flagship. It's been said before, but I want to say it again. That the Kalinago people have been the flagship for Dominica's tourism. Because Waitu Kubuli is the only island in the Caribbean that stands apart from others to say we have indigenous peoples living on our island. None of the other islands. We can say we have parrots, other places have waterfall, other countries have maniku, other places have gutitu. Other places have sandy beaches. The only thing that makes us stand out than the other islands is the fact that we have an indigenous population that still lives today in this island. The problem I have with that is that the Kalinago people are still being seen as living monuments in the tourism business, and we need to be encouraged, we need to be supported so that we, the Kalinago people, are able to make more money out of the tourist dollar that comes in the country. And I am asking everybody who can help to make us make more of those dollars. Help us with our restaurants or with different facilities. Not because you hear that we have a financial facility in our name now that you say, all is done. All these people out there who have some money and you want to invest, but you don't know where to invest. Partner with some Kalinago people and let us and help us to develop ourselves and to get more money out of the tourist dollar, and our economic development will show you that we can do it as much as anybody else can.
Chief, takeaway points: self-sufficient and a high level of independence, and also pride to be Kalinago, and to bring any conversation regarding poverty and how do we define poverty, and that's an important thing, and make the point that we will never poor. I think that's important, and the sort of shedding some light on the construct of communal land, and the argument is the commission is sort of I understand it to be one that is very simple. We are operating within a capitalist society, and so every commercial bank expects land to be given a title. That's what they know. And so when you don't have that title, then it seems to be not productive or not progressive. And so it's within the construct that we are in, and we have solutions for that. And just to say that all of these are part of a bigger plan that will continue to grow and to develop. And of course, the conversation here tonight will inform the telling of a sort of new narrative, so that this history can be taught at the schools in a more formative way. Because we are sort of a very young community in independent Dominica, so we'll add that, and it's very important we look at this, and so to also look at to remind the Dominican public that we are the flagship, one of the flagship, one of the pillars of the tourism in Dominica. And as a matter of fact, in the coming budget cycle, the Ministry of Tourism will create a pillar that will be a Kalinago pillar, where that department and that ministry will allocate funds, especially for the Kalinago space, to continue to develop that pillar. Chief Joe, let's see some takeaway points to the listening public.
Takeaway points to the listening public. As Kalinago people, we are part of a broader indigenous family, because many seem to think, but based on the history that we are taught in schools, we think that indigenous people are just Kalinago people. However, I want to say that indigenous people can be found all over the world. They come in all different shades: black, white, yellow, you name it. But this is part of the broader indigenous brotherhood or indigenous family. So know that. We want the rest of the country to know that, because you could probably originate from there as part of your ancestry. So know that, but also we want people to know their self as well. Ask the question, who we are. Because it is very easy to just give an answer, but is that really the correct answer? The question is who we are as a Dominican people. So, because an answer to that might go back to what our brother said earlier, because you could have Carlinago roots. Because if you pay close examination to your family tree, you might be surprised what you find out. If you just shake your family tree, you're wondering you'd be surprised who falling out from there. So maybe it's time to shake your family tree to see what happens. Also, it's important to know your history and to make the connection between what's supposed to be Kalinago history and Dominican history. Because you'd find it very interesting, because it's not separate histories. We have to make the connection, because it's a marvelous thing, and see how wonderful, that is. Because this is what, should be taught in the schools, but also this is what manifests itself in everyday Dominican life. And see the role that it plays, and it's not well understood. So hence we need to just check it out a little bit, our history, and not necessarily rely on what is being taken from the pages of the printed material that we use in our schools and call it history books. Also, it is interesting to note that as Kalinago people, this piece of land, that portion of Dominica, 3,782 acres of land, it is a very precious piece of land, very precious piece of the country. This is our world. And most times people think that because of our land tenure system, it has no value. And as it said in the Creole language, Tekwai Pani Valley. But I just want people to take a second thought to that and understand that this piece of land is the most precious piece of real estate in the country, because it was paid for, and paid for with the lives of our forefathers. And hence, there's absolutely no cost to this piece of land. So this is one of the most precious pieces of land, at least to us, as Kalinago people. And we want to people, others to understand that and appreciate that the importance of this piece of Dominica to us as Kalinago people. And the other thing I want to say is that as Dominicans, our vision for this country should be one vision that makes all Dominicans part of it. And sometimes we tend to draw the line between the Kalinago and Afro-Dominicans. And on many occasions, there's reason too, because you tend to want to do that based on people's responses. But Dominica got to move forward as a small, underdeveloped country, and it called for all hands on deck, whether it be Kalinago or non-Kalinago. All hands are required to ensure the development of this country.
Ubuntu Chief Joe, thank you very much for this. Key points to take away that the Kalinago people are part of a bigger family all over the world, First Peoples around the world. Also, we should know ourselves. And so here's the question: I am Kalinago. Are you? And then how do we tie in the Kalinago history and Dominican history, and how do we marry them and not become separate histories? And also, important point here: the Kalinago territory is precious real estate, and there's no value to the land itself in terms of the resources we have. And to add to that, Chief, we are in the green zone, adding more value to that land. In the case of massive emergency, in terms of volcanic eruptions on the southern part of the island, we may well be the safest place for that, and to include everyone in that vision to move forward. So the non-separation, if that is a word, of ideas and thoughts is important for moving Dominica forward. Nichebu, your thoughts on this?
I am just totally fascinated with all of the responses my brothers have given. I mean, I think they're right on point. The first thing that I would say is the Kalinago blood runs through all our veins, and it pumps in all our hearts. And like Chief Joseph said, if you just take not even a thorough or long look, just a quick look at your family tree, you'll find out that there's a Kalinago ancestor in your bloodline. And that is for maybe 99% of Dominicans. And so I just want to say to the listening audience and everybody who's following this program tonight, that to claim your heritage, be proud of the fact that you have Kalinago blood running through your veins, because our people had a very rich and courageous history. So be proud of that. Embrace that. Speak about it. Write about it. Teach it to your children. Sometimes I think Dominicans are more apt to embrace European heritage and European ways of life than they are to embrace their indigenous way of life and their indigenous heritage. So I think we should take a look at that and see how we can be more respectful of it and how we can appreciate it more. And that has to do with our consciousness. And Brother Nanichi, I think, is absolutely correct when he says there's been a shift in the consciousness of this country and the residents. When I went to the Dominica Grammar School, it was different. Today, there is a shift in consciousness. I think the broader Dominican population is much more aware of and much more sensitive and respectful of the Kalinago people and the Kalinago heritage. And so we want to encourage that and build on that. Thirdly, I would say our future, and you know, I'm sort of repeating what what my brothers have said, but our future is intertwined. There is no separate future for the Kalinago people and a separate future for the rest of Dominica. Our futures are intertwined. We are all going in the same direction. We're going to face the same challenges, and we got to do the work together to get to where we want to be. So let's just respect each other. Let's pool on each other's strengths. Let's pool our resources and our energies to make this beautiful land, this majestic country, a place that we can all be proud to live in, that our children and grandchildren can come into a space that is as beautiful as it is today. And I think, finally, I would just say that all of us in Dominica, the Kalinago tribe, all of the persons who have Kalinago blood, the people who view themselves as descendants of African slaves and descendants of Africa, let us, all of us, begin to educate our children and the generations to come of the fact that we had a glorious past, that we have a rich history. Africa has one of the richest histories in the world. But what do our children know about that? Indigenous cultures have had an amazing impact on the world and its history, but what do our children know about that? We have to spend some time to try and heal from the pain of colonialism and slavery and all of those things, and begin to remember that we come from very intelligent people, that we come from courageous people, that we had civilizations that were much more advanced than European civilizations when the Europeans came here. We have a rich history, but we are not teaching that to our children. They are not growing up with the confidence and understanding that they stand on the shoulders of intelligent people, of brave people, of civilizations that were advanced in mathematics, science, medicine. We have to begin to tell our children that they have a rich history. Kalinago, African, whatever it is. So that is my message to our people.
Thank you, Nietzsche. Thank you, Nietzsche. Very passionate again. Rich history is important, advanced aspects of civilization, and a very key point he made here: the Kalinago, the blood in all Kalinago blood in veins of our people, in our hearts, and an important point that we should attempt to claim our heritage, and to expound on the point that we should we see a shift in consciousness which we want to encourage, and to ensure that the citizenry of the island understand the heritage, and how to work together to educate the future generations is important. And so all of that really ties in nicely with all of what the brother said. I just want to share with you a quote I researched when I did some work some months ago. It's a resolution of the 5th annual meetings of the Traditional Elders Circle in 1980. And it reads, "There are many things to be shared with the 4 colors of humanity in our common destiny as one with our mother, the earth. It is this sharing that must be considered with great care by the elders and the medicine people who carry the sacred trust, so that no harm may come to people through ignorance and misuse of these powerful forces." So the connections that we're going to build tonight. And like Washla said at the beginning of this conversation, that all of that conversation will inform a new narrative as it regards a coloring book and a comic book for the young people. So it's important to have that movement at a very, very young age, so people build a consciousness and awareness, and all of this will triple and magnify in economic development, in social development, in all of those very intricate part of modern society. Is a name change for Is a name change from from Dominica to Waitikubuli too late? You need to remember that Dominica was named Dominica because it was seen on a Sunday. I wonder what would have happened if I saw it on a Monday or Tuesday. So I suspect Waitikubuli still stands because it means tall is a body. So any one of you folks here briefly, do you think it's too late to name Dominica Waitikubuli?
Well, no, it's not too late. I think that when we made a request for the name change from Carib to Kalinago, this was misunderstood by many people, and people had a reservation, or some people were completely against. But from what I found out is, when it was named after Sunday, Dominica. But also in 1970, just prior to independence, there was an issue with Dominica and the Dominican Republic. So to show the difference, they chose the name the Commonwealth of Dominica, because the word Waitukubuli is too long. So what's the difference? The Commonwealth of Dominica or Waitukubuli? Which one is longer? So I think only the dumbest set of people could have made that decision to have the country name Commonwealth of Dominica. Because every country is resorting to going back to their original names. Guyana, Jamaica is Zimaca. I mean, this is the trade, and there are so many name changes now. We had Burma, Myanmar, and we have so many countries in Africa. When I went to school, we had, and now is a totally new map of Africa. In Europe, new nations are emerging, new name changes and everything. So it would only be most appropriate at this time for our leaders, who are supposed to be the well-educated Dominican or West Indian academics, to be able to wake up and say, it is now time. It can never be too late. Because we ask for reparation to make the ills of colonization right. So I think the best thing that the country can do at this time is take a serious stand on name changes, because when we made a request to change the name from Carib to Kalinago, seriously we thought that this would have been would have snowballing effect. So one after the other that names in this country, numbers in this country would change, because we talk about it all the time. I mean, I think some evangelical churches made a request to change the name from Mount Diablo and Mono Diab to whatever mountain, and I think this was accepted. But there are so many changes that is necessary and appropriate to be made at this time, and let Dominica lead in that direction. Because I've been to so many French countries and I've seen the name change, the name of places and streets, and it's so amazing. It's named after people, even after the Kalinago, in Martinique, in Guadeloupe, and in Dominica. We stuck hard and fast to these old the colonial names, and we seem to be happy with that. And at the same time, we're moving forward as a new vibe, the other level and every other thing, but we're still hanging on to the old SOS.
Thank you very much, Chief. Nietzsche, let's do this.
That was powerful. I gotta say, that was powerful, Chief. That was powerful. It can never be too late to do the right thing. And it is past time that we change the name of this beautiful space, this beautiful piece of land, to Waitukubuli, which was its original name, its indigenous name, and get rid of this colonial title. But along with that, the chief is absolutely correct. Why are all of our beautiful natural spots, our historic sites, all have European names? Trafalgar, Middleham, Shimeleta, that's another one. Mabrika knows the Carlinago name. There should be a commission put in place by this government that is given a time frame to look at all of the names of places, streets, whatever, that need to be changed from the old colonial past to reflect the beauty, the power, the intelligence of our people. We cannot continue to say that we are independent when we are living under colonial stuff up till today. Every time you talk about Trafalgar Falls, you're talking about England and colonialism. It is time. It cannot be too late.
Nani Sheila's role. Let's do this.
Okay,
You have a
let's do
piece,
this
and
quickly.
I suspect
It's not,
Mabrika.
it's not too late, Mr. Minister, and I like the way that you're leading this conversation, and you're also leading this movement to rename Dominica to Waitukubuli. In short, it always confuses us. It always confuses people out there. They send money to Dominica, it ends up in Dominican Republic. My daughter was left stranded in France because they thought she was going to the Dominican Republic instead of Dominica, and Air France left her down. She had to overnight. This is something that's happening just recently. So the confusion between Dominica and the Dominican Republic, it is positive if we can make those changes. And you know what? I am positive and I'm confident that this can happen, Mr. Minister, and people listening out there, because I have seen a more progressive group of people thinking, more progressive people compared to back in the 80s when I served as chief. I have really seen progress, because I know back then the Caribs were not seen as indigenous and anything special, but we have seen that change, and we have seen that I'm not saying just to government, and I don't want anybody to think, well, because I am pro-government, but the fact, it is a fact. Whether you're in opposition or you support the government, it's a fact that this government have been very progressive to us, and we appreciate that. It should be changed.
Yes. Mabrika? Yes?
Yes, let me make a brief comment on that one. If you take a look back, let us think back, let us go back to the past. When our forefathers was coming from the ocean and they took a look and they saw this beautiful island, they said, Uwaitukubuli, and she answered. Our forefathers stepped on the shores of Uwaitukubuli and had a special blessing, a ceremony on that time. Named her Uwaitukubuli, and a zemi placed on the island, because that was protect Uwaitukubuli. So it is, and Uwaitukubuli is still listening. When the people came from Europe, they did not just take their time and said, okay, I'm going to name her Dominica. They say, okay, Dominica, they just planted a flag. Disrespect. So I believe that it is not too late. And to me, in my spirituality as a Kalinago, I believe that we should rename this beautiful island Uwaitukubuli, the original name of this country. Ayahura.
Thank you very much, panelists. I'm excited for this. We made an important point here. We spoke about the intellectuals, how we can make a name change, and I'm going to get some flack for this, but do you know we have one of the major intellectual centers in the Caribbean is UE, University of the West Indies, and the West Indies is a false notion. So when we want to say that government should do this and pal reps and politicians should do this, what about these massive intellectual circles we have? We still use the word Caribbean, which is false. It's named after Caribs and cannibalism. So that convention, it is relevant for Dominica, but also relevant for the entire Caribbean region. Because we still talk about the West Indies cricket team. We know for a fact that Columbus was lost, and if others going to the Indies. So whenever we use the West Indies, it's wrong. So I agree for the movement in Dominica, but also has to be a Caribbean movement. The Caribbean movement is false because it is an archipelago which I call the Kalinago Island civilization. And so the only space I know within Dominica, Waitukubuli, that has kept true to sort of indigenous names is the Goodwill area. In the 1950s, when Goodwill, the community of Goodwill was transformed from a plantation into the homes, and when Roseau people said they will be in the hospital in country because they thought Goodwill was country, the bourgeoisie of Roseau said that Goodwill was country and they're going to put a hospital there. And all of the streets in Goodwill are named after local Dominicans. So that is the only name. So the model exists already in our space. So it's not too late. Definitely, but it has to be a regional movement and an international movement because it is something that would add value to the conversation we're moving forward. I'm happy and I'm so passionate about this name change. I'm excited and soon you guys will have to call me Chubu Tuiba because that government Cozier Frederick name is going to be struck off. I'll stick to my kind. I'm going to name Chubu Tuiba. I'll strike it off legally very, very soon. And then I will lead the charge on Waitikubuli and the Caribbean island civilization, Kalinago civilization. We're wrapping up nicely, gentlemen. We're doing well. I like the energy. Washta, you agree with me? Yeah, and Washta is just taking scrupulous notes because he's the narrator of the new histories as we're pushing forward. Okay, we're moving forward. We want to look at some of the issues, panelists, friends, comrades, brothers. Some issues and ideas and suggestions that you may have with how do we portray or how do we spread the history of our heritage, and whether we do it in print, on video, and otherwise. What are some of the ideas you want to suggest that would inform that new narrative? So we want to close with that question, and we will seek to answer the Mari 101 if we have some time, which I know can be an interesting conversation. Mabrika, and what are some of the things you think we should really, really be part of the narrative? And because I will say, make the last point, we know for a fact that the history is normally written by the conquerors. Now we have a unique opportunity in our lives as Kalinago Braves to craft a new narrative. So, Mabrika, let's add some value to this.
Yes, of course. Now, I believe by doing that, we should start within. And to me, I believe that the books is good, very, very good. Children will read and they will, be excited about the books and so on. The video games, yes. But what I would like to see is that within our Kalinago space, we start painting murals. We start putting our history in paintings in the different communities. So we have designs, Sineku have its story. So we have that in Sineku, and all the way down, there are different, places of interest, myths, legends, heroes that lived in our space. Let us have paintings of these people or these special places. Let the history be written within our space so that our children can grow up seeing these things. We also could have a mini museum. Well, by my space, I'm trying that. You have an area where we have artifacts and we have photographs, we have different histories of our people and the achievements and so on, so that when your children grow up, they can see that, and the small ones can learn by seeing that. So they grow up with a sense of pride of being Kalinago. So I believe that we should also try and do that. All these houses, beautiful houses that is being built in the Kalinago territory should have a design on them. Let us decorate them, paint them up in different, designs. So when you are traveling through the Kalinago territory, you can know exactly that you are within an indigenous space, within that sacred space, the Kalinago space. So that also can bring value to our people, our children. When they look at that, then they can grow up with that sense of pride. So that is what I would really like to see again, in terms of us learning our children, learning our history and traditions and so on. So it would lead us into a more resilient future. So that is what I would like to see, of course.
Thank you, Mabrika. Chief Nanichi?
Okay, I'm gonna roll quickly. I think the idea of rewriting the history in forms that the children that children and younger people can relate to it better is an ideal thing, and that our stories, our legends, our myths, our beliefs, a lot of those things, we can get them into the writing. It would present itself very well, not only for our children, for other persons to pick up. But as we move forward in the modern world too, in the modern age, we are all looking at our phones and our computers, and I think that it would be important if we can.
We enjoy some of the African movies. We could have done better, because my own interests go back way back to 1974. Unfortunately, didn't catch one. But this is that time we had the idea of developing indigenous cinema for ourselves as indigenous people and Kalinago people. And the cultural camps, we had free so far, it worked out pretty well. The young people are asking for cultural camps. This is why they send information for young persons and bring young persons together to build friendship and everything else as young Kalinago people. So this need to continue. So maybe the cultural division could ensure that we have a annual camp as part of their activities, support for development of culture in the Kalinago territory. And the cultural groups, they needed a reawakening. For me, the cultural groups have been derailed, and I think they need to refocus on the work that they originally intended to do. And while it is good to do performance for the tourists and make some money, but at the same time, you can't lose focus on not doing the work inside of the territory for Kalinago people. This is where your focus should be, and unfortunately, it's not always that working that way, and on a website that people could log on to and get all information on the Kalinago people's history and culture. We can remember that National Geographic Fund made money available for that purpose, and I do not know what we have today, but it seems like sometimes we get it and we lose it. However, if we will get it and catch it and keep it, then it will be a benefit to us. So we wouldn't have all the complaints that we have right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Nichiabu, your closing piece on this.
Well,
you have a tough time there. At the end of
I
that
don't
table.
have to say anything because I strongly endorse everything that was said by my brothers. And the one thing that I would just add to that is to say that we as Kalinago people need to begin to write our own history. And I know my brother Shibutu is working on that, but I want to encourage other young Kalinago people, other elders, whoever has the ability and the skill to write and to tell stories. I think we must begin to write our own history, because as long as we are dependent on other people to do it for us, it will never really reflect the true essence of who we are, what our experiences have been, and so we need to begin to do it ourselves.
Nichiabu, thank you so much. We're wrapping up this evening. I think we have some of the media here. I just want to shout them out again. DBS on the Facebook page. GIS spending some time with us here this evening. Emo News, I'm excited, and I really want to thank the listening audience. It's been like 2.5 hours steady engagement thereabout. And so I'm really happy that you take time off your busy schedule to sit in. Tomorrow night we're going to continue with the women. We're going to have some powerful women here tomorrow evening, so you could join at 7. And just to wrap up the evening, at the end we want to ensure that the narrative is what we want to present to the public moving forward. A narrative that is steeped in history and tradition, and also to sort of inform our new development thrust. How do we create out of the proper history new economic models new development strides. How do we build communities, our local communities that will also help build the national movement toward climate resilient country, first climate resilient country. So it's work in progress. I'm excited. I'm happy that the elders were here this evening. As we really want to thank you this evening for spending time with us. And Washla is here also here, really excited. Support all the staff of Kalinago Upliftment and DBS Radio and UNDP and all of the strong Kalinago warriors who have been following on the feed. And I really enjoyed this part 3 of our conversation. Thank you so much. Ayahura.
And this has bring us to the end of night 3 of the SSLR project discussion on Kalinago heritage and Kalinago culture. And for those of you who were viewing and those of you who were listening, it was indeed a very powerful session with the elders. And I just want to highlight them again as we conclude this evening's proceedings. On the panel for the elders, we had Patrick Hill, Invine Auguiste, Gerald Langlais, and Garnette Joseph. These men have been very instrumental in the development and in the Kalinago people. We have had former chiefs, we have had individuals who created the Carifuna cultural groups, and they have had a very impactful presence in the Kalinago territory. And their testimonies that they have given here this evening were in fact very powerful in their fight, in the quest for equality for the Kalinago people, and for us not to just look at them as persons living in a space, but rather people who are equal to the rest of us on this island and can make a meaningful contribution to the development of Dominica. So there you have it, folks. We are concluding this evening, and we want to say thank you to you, the viewers on our DBS Facebook page, and to you, the listeners on 88.10 FM dial. My name is James Rodney, and on behalf of the technical team and the management of DBS Radio, we say good night as we take it back to Master Control for the rest of the evening's programming. Good night, and we'll see you here again tomorrow for night 4 as the SLR project concludes with a panelist of powerful women in the Kalinago territory. Good night.